Alex stirs from their sleep, their daze immediately fading the moment they realize they aren't in their tent. The cold bites at their arms, the tank top they wear to bed barely giving them enough protection against the night air. Something is wrong. A feeling like something is pulling at them, lifting their head up, their jaw being forced out. They can't breathe normally, instead having to inhale through their nose, thanks to something blocking their mouth. The dark is all-consuming, the shadows of the desert blotting out everything. Alex's eyes start to adjust to the faint moonlight. The familiar sensation of being boxed in creeps over them, the sense of claustrophobia. They're standing shoulder to shoulder with the crowd, just like they had been hours earlier, as they watched musicians take to the stage. Was that what this was? Some weird dream about the last 6 days? Or the phantom, muscle memory adjacent feeling of being stood among the rest of the audience? No, they aren't dreaming. Others are standing beside them, some asleep, some stirring. Alex can just about make out the outline of each person, but there's something wrong. Something is lashed to each person's head, long, sinewy strands that trail upwards. Alex's eyes follow the strange restraints, noticeably slick and unpleasant, highlighted by the dim moon. There's dozens, maybe hundreds, reaching upwards towards the center of the crowd. Then, Alex's gaze falls over what's at the heart of the crowd, reaching up into the sky above their heads, silhouetted against the night sky. They would scream if it wasn't for their tongue blocking up their airway. 6 days earlier, and Alex is hauling 2 tents off the back of a truck, while their friend Dan grabs the other 2. Backpacking across Europe has, so far, been every bit the experience they hoped it would be. Since heading out on their travels alongside Becky and Dan, their group have adopted a stray member in the form of Christian, a South African student they picked up in Bremen before heading north towards Denmark. 8 full days of hiking, hitchhiking, and at least 1 ferry that the group had managed to sneak aboard without paying had brought them to the Vig Festival. It's actually Christian's idea. Having overheard the group's plans to head to Denmark, he chimed in, discussing his plans to visit an annual music festival over there. And like that, he's part of the group. Alex isn't sure what to make of Christian, but he seems nice enough. Occasionally, Christian will talk with Becky in fluent Afrikaans, since she managed to get almost fluent while doing humanitarian work in Namibia. Alex can't understand a word of what they were saying, but Becky seems to laugh. They quickly write Christian off as a trust fund baby, someone just traveling on his parents' dime and trying to get lucky with the latest group of strangers he's attached himself to. Still, he's tolerable enough, nodding along and trying to contribute to the group's discussions about raising taxes for corporations and billionaires. He just never seems as appalled as everyone else at the government. When questioned about this, he shrugs and claims he doesn't follow politics, as if that's an answer. Once the tents are set up, the festival quickly gets into full swing. Musicians that none of the group have ever heard of take to the stage. Car Park North, Queen Machine, the Lars Lilholt Band, but it doesn't matter. Alex, Becky, Dan, and Christian might not know the songs or even speak much Danish, but it doesn't matter. The atmosphere of the festival, the buzz of the crowd, and the hum of the amps sends literal shudders through them and makes the whole place come to life. They are up for hours, until long after the sun sets, even after the last act of the night. The group shares drinks with total strangers, dances and laughs. A few even slip and get mud all over their clothes. But nobody's complaining. In fact, even Christian manages to crack a smile before they all stagger back to their tents for the night. Alex falls asleep happy, and that makes what was about to happen even worse. It's a few days in when their group gets their first fright. Alex has been wrapped up in their sleeping bag, unable to get themselves settled. They're tossing and turning, too many thoughts in their head to properly silence their mind. Then suddenly, something rustles the outside of their tent. The noise and motion of it startles them, causing Alex to sit bolt upright. Their hand fumbles for a torch in the dark as whatever is moving outside begins pulling open the tent zipper. Their hand clasps around the torch and clicks it on, revealing the silhouette of a figure outside the tent, trying to come in. Immediately, Alex yells at them to go away. They've got the wrong tent. It's probably Dan or Christian, heading back from taking a late-night trip to the admittedly disgusting portable toilets. Or it could have been one of the other festival goers, even more reason to tell them to get lost. Alex raises their voice. The shadow cast against their tent stops. There's something off about it, though. Whoever is out there isn't standing upright. They're slouched, shuffling almost. And there's something moving around near the silhouette's head. Alex can't fully make it out, but it looks like a snake. It'd hardly be the first live music festival someone decided to bring an exotic pet to. But the more they look, the more it seems like a long, tentacle-like tongue coming out of the figure's mouth. The figure turns and ambles away, leaving Alex once again alone in the dark. Shaking their head, they chalk up the strange sights to sleep deprivation, until a few days later. The next morning, Alex tries not to think about the encounter from the previous night, putting the matter to rest after they ask the rest of their group. Each one of them denies being the late-night intruder, nor do any of them recall having any unexpected visitors of their own. The only person with any memory of the night before is Dan, who recalls having a horrible nightmare about choking. With that, Alex thinks and hopes that's the last incident, and that they'll be able to enjoy the rest of the festival. The next few days pan out much the same as before, with all the live music, drinking, revelry, and mud to be expected. But Alex can't get the unusual image of the long-tongued shadow out of their head. It doesn't help that at no point do they notice any eccentric Danish festival goer with a snake in their company. But on the night of the 5th day of the festival, something else happens. A piercing scream from Becky's tent wakes Alex up. In seconds, they run over to their friend's tent, the front flap open, to find Becky wide-eyed and startled inside. Alex tries to calm her down, asking her what happened. She responds by explaining that Christian had come back to her tent that night, and Becky had awoken to find him asleep next to her. But something else was in there. Something had reached out of Christian's mouth while he was sleeping. It was a long, slimy shape, and it had been trying to work its way inside Becky's mouth. Alex reassures their friend that she just had an intense nightmare. There's no way something like that could ever happen. And on top of that, there's no sign of Christian in Becky's tent. It takes Becky a while to fall asleep again. She's unsettled and can't calm herself. So Alex offers to share her tent, grabbing their sleeping bag from their own tent and clambering into the cramped, single-person space. As Alex sleeps, though, they find themselves having a similar nightmare. Just like the other night, they're tossing and turning. They're unable to get comfortable, entering into that uneasy, sleep-deprived state, unsure if they're fully awake or not. Next to them in the cramped tent, Becky lies asleep. But as Alex turns to face her, their friend's mouth opens and something unfurls from inside. It's a tongue, only it's too long. It moves like a living creature with a mind of its own. The horrifying, slippery thing glides to Alex. They're unable to back away, the confines of the tent blocking any escape. Alex closes their eyes, waiting for the inevitable. In the morning, they write it off as another weird dream. But Alex's real nightmare was waking up finding their tongue extending out of their own mouth, tangled into a mass with the other festival goers. The morning after the 6th night of the festival, strange people in suits sweep through the field. Men with guns and tactical gear start rounding up everyone who had been sleeping in one of the tents on site, detaining them. New tents soon replace the festival goers, but these tents are sterile and white, save for the unfamiliar insignia branded on their sides, matching the logo worn on the uniforms of the new arrivals. Alex doesn't remember the night before, the tongue extending out of their mouth and reaching out towards a writhing, fleshy mass. Ever since they woke up, all they've heard are whispers about some kind of illness. Someone at the festival has been carrying an infection that everyone now needs to be tested for. As they're herded into a line towards one of the tents, they notice Christian over their shoulder, jumping a few spots, getting right behind Alex. The pair of them try to make small talk, but it's hard not to acknowledge what's happening. Christian asks who all the people in uniforms with the white tents are. Alex doesn't have an answer. The government. They shrug as if that's an answer. Don't we hate them? Christian chuckles under his breath, speaking Afrikaans again. As much as we need them, Alex replies, unsure why they said that, or why they were speaking fluent Afrikaans. As the SCP Foundation have since determined, SCP-4038 is a previously undocumented anomalous contagion. Concerningly enough, numerous infections have been observed within human beings, and these subjects are collectively known as SCP-4038-1. However, while it is hard to determine the exact point at which the contagion infects a human body, What is known is that it only affects an SCP-4038-1 infectee during sleep. There have been no recorded instances of SCP-4038 symptoms during the time in which an infected subject is awake, nor are there any harmful effects on their health during this time. The same cannot be said for when the infected are asleep, though. Researchers at the Foundation are still unable to determine the specific biological vector linked with SCP-4038 infections, but what has become clear through observation of infected subjects during their sleep is that the infection is spread via direct oral contact. This has been regarded as highly unsettling, though somewhat unsurprising, in various notes made by the Foundation's anomalous contagion experts. These research personnel have also speculated that there could well be numerous infectious outbreaks of SCP-4038 that are still yet to be identified, given that symptoms only manifest at night. Some infectees might go completely unnoticed, allowing the contagion to spread exponentially, avoiding discovery until there are already many more SCP-4038-1 subjects. As such, with the only recorded instances of it taking place under SCP Foundation observation, this is what SCP-4038 does to the human body once asleep. Shortly after the infectee enters into their sleep cycle, the primary anomalous feature of SCP-4038 will take effect. Their tongue will begin to grow and contract, increasing in length to far beyond that of an average tongue. Throughout, it maintains its normal levels of dexterity and strength, not changing in width or girth at any point during sleep. During this portion of the symptoms, it also cannot be observed outside of a subject's mouth. Given how widespread infections may be, and that this contagion only affects human beings, the research department of the SCP Foundation have taken to nicknaming SCP-4038 the common tongue. Once the tongue has increased in length, observed instances of infections have shown it to develop a degree of sentience too. It appears to be disconnected from the infected person's own normal sense of sentience. Foundation medical experts have conducted magnetic resonance imaging testing on a number of sleeping SCP-4038-1 subjects. The results of these tests have confirmed that once a subject enters REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, the phase in which dreams commonly occur, they begin to exhibit abnormal brain activity. MRI scans have shown that this is localized entirely within the infected person's Broca's and Wernicke's areas and their angular gyrus, the parts of the brain that relate to language and the processing of speech. Additional and simultaneous abnormalities have also been detected by MRI, taking place in the motor cortex, the region of the cerebral cortex involved with planning, controlling, and carrying out complex voluntary movements. All of this is already more than enough for Foundation experts to confirm the anomalous nature of this contagion. However, further symptoms continue to take place while the SCP-4038 subject sleeps. Without waking up, the infected person will begin to mutter in a complex mix of various different languages, regardless of whether or not they have any prior knowledge of these languages. Foundation linguistic experts have estimated that SCP-4038-1 instances speak in a combination of about 150 languages, including some that are believed to be long since extinct. Expecting the mutterings might conceal a hidden message, the Foundation assigned research teams specializing in linguistic analysis to decode them. The research teams were instructed to undertake the complex process of notating, translating, and transcribing everything said by SCP-4038-1 subjects during their sleep. The translations of the muttered words and phrases are invariably curses, expletives, insults, and vague threats in various different languages, all being directed at humanity. The duration of these symptoms seems to vary from one SCP-4038 candidate to the next. However, the muttering typically goes on for between 10 to 20 minutes. After this stage of the symptoms has concluded, an SCP-4038-1 subject will then proceed to stick out their anomalously elongated tongue. The maximum length that their tongue can reach increases at a rate that is partly related to the time since they became infected with SCP-4038. Those who contracted the common tongue earlier have longer tongues. Following their prior infection, the tongue can grow from anywhere between 6 centimeters longer than normal to 32. The rate of growth is also believed by some Foundation personnel to be directly linked to the number of languages that the infected person already speaks. Once extended from the subject's mouth, the tongue will then attempt to search for any other sleeping humans within its range. It is capable of movement entirely independent of the sleeping infected person. It appears to be partially sapient, capable of opening doors and windows and moving other obstructions out of its path in order to locate other potential hosts for SCP-4038. Scans of infected subjects' brains during this stage indicated that there is no longer a connection between the SCP-4038-1 instance's brain and their tongue at this point. The tongue will navigate solely using touch, as opposed to being able to see its way around. Should it feel an uninfected sleeping human being, the elongated tongue will push its way into their mouth and pass on the contagion. Tests observed by the Foundation have revealed that infection occurs within approximately 90 seconds, taking hold and successfully transmitting the common tongue in 95% of cases. Once it has infected a person, an SCP-4038-1 subject's tongue will then begin searching for additional hosts. Other more invasive tests have revealed that damaging or removing the tongue does not cause the infected SCP-4038-1 to wake up at all. When damaged or apprehended by conscious humans, the anomalously elongated tongue will begin to writhe in panic before expiring. Given the abnormal size of these infected, sapient tongues, there is a significant risk posed to the SCP-4038-1 subject. Their enlarged tongues can end up choking them in their sleep, blocking their airway, and causing death by asphyxiation. Several instances of SCP-4038-1 under Foundation observation were saved from this fate. However, this came at the result of surgeons performing emergency tracheotomies on the subjects. After a hole is surgically cut into their windpipes, allowing the infected subject to breathe, the tongue begins the process of anomalously fast necrosis, beginning at the tip until the elongated portion of the tongue has fallen out completely. This, however, does not signify the end of an SCP-4038 infection. A subject's tongue will begin growing again the following night. As if that wasn't bad enough, the Foundation has discovered that so-called towering events can exacerbate infections of SCP-4038. Towering events refer to instances of infection wherein multiple SCP-4038-1s are asleep within a certain radius. Despite exhaustive efforts, research teams at the SCP Foundation remain unable to pinpoint the exact parameters that trigger a towering event. However, what is known is that 24 infected SCP-4038-1 individuals sleeping within a confined 1.3 square kilometer area will result in a roughly 18% chance of triggering an event. The assumption from researchers is the more SCP-4038-1 infectees sleeping within close proximity to each other, the higher the likelihood of a towering event. Locations where large groups of people sleep in close proximity are considered prime grounds for towering events if the SCP-4038 contagion spreads unchecked. Military barracks and naval vessels, with their densely packed quarters, now operate under constant Foundation surveillance, the risk of infection ever present. Civilian events such as camping festivals and bustling international hostels, brimming with travelers, have also come under scrutiny, each posing unique challenges to containment efforts. During a towering event, the gathered sleeping instances of SCP-4038-1 will simultaneously arise and head to the nearest open outdoor space. This is typically an area with no tree cover, usually parking lots or open fields. The infected individuals also do not awaken during this time. However, their movements are notably distinctly different from non-anomalous cases of sleepwalking. These infected will move with a lurching, shuffling gait instead of moving around upright and walking in a fashion more closely resembling traditional sleepwalking. This is because this movement isn't the result of an infected person. Their tongue instead uses its host as a vehicle. Most will extend out of the subject's mouth, navigating their way around through the dark by sensing any obstacles that might be in its path. This action has been likened by some Foundation research personnel as similar to that of a blind person using a cane. However, during towering events, an SCP-4038-1 instance's elongated tongue is also able to make use of their ocular systems to aid in moving its way around. Some infectees with pre-existing mobility issues or other conditions affecting their motor functions have even been witnessed extending their tongues and using them to assist with walking. Once the group of infected persons reach an open space, they will gather around the SCP-4038-1 infectee with the longest maximum tongue size. this individual will arrive in the center of the gathered group and raise their arms above their head, extending their anomalously enlarged tongue up into the air. The surrounding instances of SCP-4038-1 will then proceed to mirror this action. The enormous tongues will then extend, intertwining and wrapping together with as many others as possible in order to create a thick, pointed tower. Hence the name, Towering Event. Once all of the infectees' tongues are fully extended, the infectees connected to them will suddenly wake up, completely aware of their surroundings, inevitably confused, distressed, or outright terrified. None of them are able to control their elongated tongues. However, those interviewed are cogent, and none report experiencing any pain despite their SCP-4038 symptoms. All are able to communicate, and while attempting speech is made difficult by the presence of their enlarged tongues, SCP-4038-1 instances are able to gesture and write during this stage of the Towering Event. This cognizance lasts for a duration of around 90 seconds, at which time the infectees are returned to their previous sleepwalking adjacent state. Once this occurs, they will collectively withdraw their tongues and begin shuffling back towards their original sleeping locations. After waking up, no one will retain any memory of the Towering Event. However, if any of the SCP-4038-1 infectees that participated in the event was fluent in a language, then all who participated will have an equal level of fluency as these individuals by the following morning. Outside of these towering events, those who have been infected with SCP-4038 usually remain unaware of the contagion. Although the anomalous symptoms of the common tongue manifest during sleep, while awake, infectees are able to function normally. Infections can go unnoticed for prolonged periods of time in those who sleep alone. However, the SCP Foundation has discovered that there are a series of specific words and phrases that will trigger a response linked to SCP-4038 symptoms while the subject remains awake. When one of these phrases is spoken, the SCP-4038-1 subject will lose control of their tongue, larynx, and only retain partial control of their jaw. They will still be able to maintain control over the rest of their muscles. Given that they are cogent and aware during these instances, the subject will often speak through gritted teeth in an attempt to suppress the involuntary response given by their infection. These trigger phrases are language-specific and will only be returned with a response if the infectee is fluent or near fluent in the spoken language. For example, reciting the phrase, "prisons of bone and tooth" in Japanese is met with the response, "but we make them suffer." These responses seem to convey some of the sentience of an infectee's anomalously elongated tongue. The English trigger phrase is, "diversity necessary," the response to which is always, "Oh God, 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 more." Another referring to their SCP-4038-1 hosts, "our disgusting shells" in Thai, is received with the reply, "our unwanted protection." For those fluent in Afrikaans, asking the question, "don't we hate them?" will be answered with, "as much as we need them." This cryptic reply suggests a parasitic nature to the contagion, one that depends on its hosts for survival, while harboring deep hostility toward humanity. Should those who can speak Hebrew recite the phrase, "we will unmake Babel," to an infectee, the response given is, "with our own towers." Further attempts to communicate with the SCP-4038 contagion have proved ineffective, with responses only limited to the same few phrases. However, the SCP Foundation have found the trigger phrases somewhat useful in determining whether or not a person has contracted an SCP-4038 infection. This allows researchers and Mobile Task Force operatives to perform rapid diagnoses of potential infectees. The SCP Foundation is aware of at least 8 separate outbreaks of the contagion since its discovery. At present, there is no known cure for the common tongue.